So we've previously discussed how Dragon Ball's depiction of aging is not as straightforward as you might think, or at least at first glance. So our topic for today will also be technically tied to time, as it will be addressing the probable future of said Dragon Ball timeline. Not only that, but it has been revealed that the aforementioned future was built through substantial collaboration with Toriyama himself many years ago, who exerted significant control over the future events of the story. And some themes appear to be gradually being absorbed into the primary narrative. Keep in mind that not everything from this source will actually be used, but it's still fun to revisit the weird world of Dragon Ball Online and assess what is still doable and what is not. I mean, basically, this is a goldmine for Toriyama, because back in the late 2000s, he did all of this work, and now he's still reaping the benefits. He's essentially made his life so much easier right now. He's thanking his past self so much. It's worth noting though that Online was released in Korea 3 years before Battle of Gods, so a lot of stuff you see in Battle of Gods may have been born years prior, and including Xenoverse. And Super Dragon Ball Heroes. Yeah, there's a lot of inspiration from that game in Dragon Ball. And given that Online begins at the year 1000, the age 1000, that's like 220 years past where we are in Super, there's been a lot of action happening in the interim, so some of which we won't go into detail about because it's already been covered on the channel. Check our discussion playlist for more, but instead, our objective for today is to walk through the timeline and determine which portions have remained constant, which sections still have the potential to occur, they just haven't happened yet, and which parts will never occur, that they've already been rewritten. So the first thing that will not happen is Pilaf attempting to conquer the world again in the age 780, because now we're currently in age 783. And he is behaving in the way of a boy imp now just resigned to being an employee of Bulma's Capsule Corp. And since 780 and 781 were around the time of the Tournament of Power and the Moro sagas in the manga, we are also unlikely to see him returning to malicious actions, Pilaf. I think his day is done. He's just going to be a gag side character. It's obvious that the concept has already evolved beyond him. Then there's Sho, who I've mentioned before in a video, who used to work for Capsule Corp and is obviously supposed to be a descendant of Mai. Sho also has ties to the Paella gang, which is essentially Pilaf's offspring. It's now the Paella gang instead of the Pilaf gang. This is an extremely disturbing case. Given that we've discussed this at another time, it's tough to say whether for sure if certain that Sho's supposed to be a member of the family or not, yet it's difficult not to think about it. Is she really related to Bulma? Again, we've talked about this before, but still worth thinking about. Following that, we'll talk about Majin Buu and Hercule. Majin Buu would then first give birth to Miss Buu, because he was lonely and he'd been reading romantic novels and thinking, Buu should have girl. And then the two of them would then go on to create various copies of themselves and then the Majin race of people that you can play in Dragon Ball Online. Which may still occur, it's certainly possible. And given the adulation they've earned from Xenoverse players, it really wouldn't be surprising at all if both of them made an appearance in the main timeline, including Miss Buu, or B, or whatever her name will be, wreaking havoc after their first visit as well, but still, it would be a nice addition. Hercule, on the other hand, would begin to teach a telecommunicated Satan-style martial arts course after he quit competing in the bouts of the actual World Martial Arts Tournament, all in the age of 791. So that's about like 8 years from Superhero. Something that a year later would have gone down really badly and have to be renamed the Pan Fighting Network in recognition of Pan's swift ascent to notoriety as a successful martial arts instructor in her own right, despite her young age. Which, given the fact around about this time she'd probably be about like 12. And you know, given Pan's portrayal in Superhero, I can definitely see that happening. She's quite gregarious. And given that her mother is also pursuing a career in the same sector, she still is a martial arts instructor, I feel that this is the road that they will take her down, making Pan the actual successor to both Hercule and Goku, and sharing their passion for martial arts with the entire population of the planet, and being majorly successful to boot. And ironically, Hercule's semi-biographical film Satan Legend, or Satan Wars, would pique people's curiosity in Ki anyway, and maybe convince them to learn how to channel their ki from Pan. So essentially, these big biopics have now been reduced to commercials. it is now presently regarded as a classic by some audiences, all thanks to what Pan did. Now for the serious stuff. In Age 801, Goku has started to accept that he is now reaching the end of his biological life, and is determined to settle the score with Vegeta in a final battle. Years later, a supernova is seen in the sky above Earth, which astronomers assumed is the consequence of some sort of big explosion, but the Dragon team, they know it was the final struggle of Goku and Vegeta. I mean, that's quite a poetic way to end things, but in terms of the time frame that we're dealing with, there aren't actually many problems with it. First and foremost, Goku would be about 60 years old at this point, whereas Vegeta would be 74. If they had matured appropriately, their ages would have been 64 and 69, nice, respectively, making the age gap less of an issue. We do know, however, that even at the age of 80, they would have still been technically capable of fighting, but we don't know for sure whether Saiyans become vulnerable or not, or whether they actually deteriorate massively after the age of 80. But then again, there is evidence that has a substantial influence over them, limiting their ability to remain active for just an extended amount of time. I mean, it's really uncommon to see an old Saiyan. The first time we've ever seen an old Saiyan without black hair was Paragus. At this time, Goku has about at least another 20 years or so of fighting ahead of him, while Vegeta might be a fair bit less. Not to mention the impact of the announcement that would be had on their families. That would be extremely Goku though, choosing to die in a big ball of flame with Vegeta rather than on his deathbed with his family. But at this point, if this happens, honestly, Age 801 is way too soon for that to happen. That's only like 18 years now. Furthermore, Vegeta could pull a Bulma in order to match Goku's age. Even if his pride stopped him from doing so, I've got a feeling that Bulma would have done it for him anyhow. On paper, this appears to be a suitable climax to both of their stories, them fighting each other one last time. But when it will occur in the actual timeline remains a bit of an enigma. Nonetheless, this is a potential conclusion. And I actually did a video about my own interpretation of how this would go down. You can check the video out up top, Dragon Ball Ascent. But you can check out the synopsis above. The next item on the list is Gohan's pioneering research book, which will increase the public awareness of Ki even further and lead to the formation of 3 brand new schools dedicated to the subject. The Kiko Kenjutsu Sword School, founded in the year 805 by Gohan and Trunks, because obviously Trunks loves his swords, as well as the Restored Turtle and Crane schools respectively, about 16 years later, commanded by older versions of Krillin and Tenshinhan. It's quite ironic that Goku dies at the age of 60, but these two are still teaching near the age of 80. But then again, if they've been teaching with Roshi, and Roshi might still be around at this point, he might have shared their secrets. On the other hand, Tenshinhan might actually have an advantage because he is a mutant earthling or an alien-human hybrid based on previous research. And for Krillin, definitely Roshi would have given him a hand. And it would provide those characters with something entertaining and fascinating to do. The only thing that worries me about Goten and Trunks is that we haven't seen Goten brandishing a sword yet. So is he actually any good with it? But hey, based on what the manga's doing right now, that could change any day now. We might actually see Saiyaman X2 wielding a spirit sword or something. And that concept really appeals to me. Seriously, if you've not been reading the manga, Goten is doing great here. Goten, more like Goat 10. Now the next big event comes about in online from age 820, with the death of Hercule from obviously old age, and the subsequent assault by the remnants of the Frieza army. Okay, this is actually really funny here. Based on the actual research, they wrongly assumed that Hercule was the strongest in the universe, and based on all the media on Earth, once he was gone, they could just swoop in and take over the planet. These stragglers are being led by members of the Frieza Honor Guard, a group first presented to us in the actual anime movie of Broly. Yeah, the new one. Rigel is the name of their captain and leader. There is actually a lot more information to be found here, a surprisingly decent amount given it's not main canon material. And it is a running gag about his worldwide notoriety, which began in Super with the whole dog people. And second, if the current timeline is correct, would Frieza actually be dead? Or would he actually still be around? We're at a loss for words, honestly. As of now, it's uncertain if they intend to give us the final epic confrontation with Frieza, or whether Toriyama intends to keep him around, just mingling around the universe as a potential threat, a permanent one within the series, like a Joker Batman sort of thing. We'll find out more soon, but for now it's a bit vague Because in terms of lifespan, Frieza has a substantial edge over all other Saiyans because he is likely to outlive them all. He could live for as long as Namekians, several hundred years. Furthermore, we cannot rule out the potential of Frieza having a descendant right now, because we've seen it as a gag, but it's possible. It's unknown whether it'll actually be Kuriza, who's always been touted to be his son, who is actually a Toriyama creation, even though we are talking about a character who initially appeared in a comedy gag manga, Neko Majin. Except for the fact that Hercule's funeral will be a huge worldwide event. This is simply too unpredictable at the present, but hey, you never know. Following that, in Age 851, Mira from Xenoverse attacks New Namek, forcing the Namekians to flee to Earth again. And despite my uncertainty of whether Mira would be merged into the main timeline, given how strong he and Toa are linked to the actual Xenoverse games and online, I believe that we will see some Namekians ending up living on Earth with humans and Yardratians. Oh yes, Yardratians. Since this design is from Dragon Ball Online and has now been integrated into the official canon of the manga in addition to the one from the anime. So these two coexist, they are different brands of Yardratians. So for years we thought that this little version, you think, really, is that a Yardratian? Well, now according to Toyotaro it is. They arrived on Earth not because of any evil power, but because of a natural disaster on Yardrat. Furthermore, the Namekian colonists possess the capacity to terraform portions of Earth's ground, culminating in the development of Porunga rocks. Again, I believe this is a very strong possibility, given that Namekians have become the second most prominent species in the current Dragon Ball canon, and that we've been given a lot of lore elements in recent movie and manga sagas, so to not fully utilize them and fully integrate with Earthlings doesn't really make much sense. But then we get onto the favorite thing that evolves from Namekians, evil Namekians, which initially begin reproducing around the age 940, which symbolizes one of our biggest sources of hope. Given that Piccolo is capable of achieving incredibly high levels of strength now, the question of why we lack a true dark Namekian foe emerges. To be honest, I'm not sure if Toriyama will incorporate Narak from Dragon Ball Online, the evil Namekian leader, and his followers into the plot, but I can't shake the feeling that some type of spiritual successor to Narak will be incorporated into the story in the not too distant future. Again, we haven't even seen what Narak looks like for sure. All we know is that he's a big son of a gun, about the size of Cell Max. And in terms of Cell Max, might you say he's a reference to Cell X? Given how massive, cumbersome, and terrifying they both are? Max's overall look is a little more muted though, probably a bit more pragmatic, whereas Cell X, 10-year-olds would love it. Nonetheless, it's crucial to emphasize that this is a result of this period. This is what they came up with back in the early 2010s. And with that, I've covered the most important issues concerning the future of Dragon Ball Online. Whether or not it actually happens, the chance exists that it could be a catalyst for anything in Super in the future. That timeline is our favourite to call back to, since it focuses on a big number of characters and places them in interesting circumstances, including some of the Earthlings. What's the coolest thing that you've learned from Dragon Ball Online? Do you anticipate more references to come in the future? Leave a comment below, and let's get this discussion going. And I will see you in the next video. Catch you later!